Okay, as we resume, Shogunas West, you have your additional 15 minutes. Care to avail? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, just to close off the point that I was making, and I will not go into any detail, but I think I had just referenced the Rule of Law Index. I spoke about what it means in terms of being evaluated as a country and a government adhering to the rule of law, and I will just make the simple point that we were rated as 63 out of 139 countries, and that was in 2021. In 2022, we are now rated 67 out of 140 countries. So this is something that we definitely need to keep an eye on. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, no disrespect to any of our international counterparts, but when you look at some of the countries that have scored ahead, I say it in the context of they having civil riots and they have different issues over the last 2 decades, that it is something that we have to take stock of. In terms of our region, regionally, we have scored 14 out of 32. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I leave that there. I think that these are matters when we look at the factors upon which they assess us. One of the factors is constraint of government powers, open government. These are matters that I think are applicable when we see what we are dealing with here today. Respecting fundamental rights of citizens is another one. So I leave that there, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will not use my entire remaining time. I know member for Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West and San Fernando West have prevailed upon me to keep it short on this side of the recess. I want to say, and I will end, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that it is said that, and I'm quoting a famous quote from John Locke in the 2 treaties of government, and that says, wherever law ends, tyranny begins. And it is something that we must make sure that we do not find ourselves being labeled anywhere close to that description. Wherever law ends, tyranny begins. And I say tyranny from the point of view of respect for fundamental rights. So I know Diego Martin Central may want to respond to that, but that is something that I want to place on the record. And an author that is more at home for us, and I speak of none other than V.S. Naipaul. V.S. Naipaul said, a government that breaks its own laws can also easily break you. So a government that breaks its own laws can also easily break you. So that is from a bend in the river. So that is V.S. Naipaul. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I conclude, I want to say to the government that all of this could have been avoided if it is they had simply followed the law and had called the local government elections in time, which was before March 2023. And that is something which I don't wish to get into according to the Privy Council ruling. I want them to know that leaving here today, I see no reason why, we in the opposition see absolutely no reason why you can't have an announcement, whether in or out of the parliament, as to when is the local government elections date. And that is something that we can have as quickly as possible, and that will ensure that we can return to some normalcy in terms of the running of the municipal corporations. We can see a return to the practice of the rule of law that we should abide by, and we can also see a return to good governance. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to tell members on the other side that they can run, but they cannot hide. Local government elections is upon them, and they need to call that date, so they must answer to the people. The people wish to exercise their rights. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you for this time.
I recognize the Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do not propose to spend a lot of time in my wind-up. I wish to address just a few of the points that have been made by the opposition speakers today. A point which has been made that I will immediately respond to by the leader of the opposition is to her seeking to call into question the validity, efficacy, and wisdom of Clause 5 of the bill before this House. And she sought to suggest that the purpose of the clause is to seek to have this House validate things into the future. That is wrong, and a simple reading of the language of Clause 5 makes it clear that what Clause 5 seeks to do is two things. One, to validate the functions of councillors and aldermen between the 2nd of December 2022 and the 18th of May 2023, that is to say the date of the Privy Council ruling. That's the first thing that it seeks to do. And the second thing that it seeks to do, recognizing that we are before the Parliament now in the present, to ask the Parliament immediately into the future to bring legislation into effect is for this Parliament to pass legislation which, upon commencement, will have validated the acts and functions of the councillors and aldermen up to the point in the immediate past on the commencement of this bill into law to validate that which preceded the passing into law. So there is no seeking on the part of the clause before this House to validate anything into the future. And if I may say so with the greatest of respect, that is one instance of a quality of sophistry that I have had the opportunity to listen to this afternoon. So I reject that strained interpretation on the part of the leader of the opposition. The leader of the opposition has raised a second point, which I would take together with a point also raised by the member for Chaguanas West. And it is to suggest that somehow or the other, what the Privy Council has done is to rule that this government has acted unconstitutionally. The member for Chaguanas West in particular allowed himself to utter a most strained, and if I may say so with respect, misrepresentation of the language of the Privy Council in the majority. So it is, I hope Mr. Deputy Speaker, you will permit me the latitude, because the record is important for the public listening as well as for the record of this House. Permit me to read in clear terms paragraph 20 of the decision of the Privy Council. What the Privy Council said at paragraph 20 is, on any footing, the absence of any detailed provisions concerning local government elections leads to the inevitable conclusion that a change in the length of the terms of office of incumbent councillors and aldermen cannot amount to a contravention of the Constitution. The term for which representatives have been elected is important, but an increase by 1 year in the term of incumbent councillors and aldermen does not of itself breach any provision of the Constitution. That language is with respect, uttered by the Privy Council, Her Majesty's English language. And it is a language that we have adopted, that we have been to school, we have been taught, we have learned, and we profess to be able to speak it. It could not be more clear. The English language word to describe what I just read at paragraph 20 of the ruling of the Privy Council is pellucid. So that it is not to be, with the greatest of respect, condoned for the dignity of this House to be used to put about a misrepresentation of the ruling of the Privy Council. In no terms did the Privy Council say that what this government has done amounts to a breach of the Constitution. Quite the contrary. And I have said it in another place, and I will repeat it. The constitutionality of the government's actions have been pronounced on by no less than 8 judges. The High Court Judge of Trinidad and Tobago, 3 judges of the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago, and together, unanimously, 3 judges in the majority and 2 judges in the minority in the Privy Council who ruled clearly that this government did not breach any provision of the Constitution in extending the triennial to a quadrennial. I hope that my learned friends, and I use that term out of the other place where I have spent some time, and perhaps I should stop using it in this place to refer to my friends on the other side. I hope that they will understand that it is not correct, for whatever purpose, to misrepresent that which has been said by a court of law. It wins no friends, it wins no respect. And if I may come to a further point, and sophistry again is the word to describe it. The leader of the opposition spent her entire contribution speaking to the interpretation which the majority of the Privy Council arrived at in ruling that the incumbent councillors, by the amendment which was passed in November 2022, were not caught by that amendment, and therefore their term had come to an end. And in listening to the leader of the opposition, one might have been tempted to believe that that point of interpretation was a point which formed the center of the arguments of those who represented the political activist when he went before the High Court, when he went before the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago. So again, with your leave, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I ask your permission to read paragraphs 15 and 16 of the judgment of the Privy Council. Paragraph 15 of the majority. While it appears from the judgments in the Court of Appeal that the appellant's submission based on the Constitution was his primary case, it was presented to the board as a secondary argument. The short point there, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that the political activists whose clarion call has been heralded through this judgment did not go to the High Court or to the Court of Appeal and argue on a matter of interpretation. His case was cast squarely on the fact that the government had acted unconstitutionally, and that argument was rejected in the High Court, in the Court of Appeal, and by the Privy Council. And it was only when he got to the Privy Council, as the Privy Council tells us at paragraph 15, that the argument over the interpretation of Section 11, subsection 4, and Section 11, subsection 5, meant that the incumbent councillors had ended their term and could not be extended into the quadrennial. That interpretation argument was for the first time presented as the primary argument of the political activists. It was not the main plank of his argument. So that to listen to the leader of the opposition suggest that throughout this was an argument that had been mounted as the core of the case for the applicant was just simply a misrepresentation of how the case arose, how it was presented, and indeed how it was determined by the Privy Council. So again, I reject that approach to misrepresenting the state of the arguments that resulted in the majority judgment of the Court of Appeal. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm going to ask your leave, and I genuinely will wish your leave here to correct a further misrepresentation that is being put out by members on the other side, which speaks to misrepresenting what I have said about this decision in this matter. It was said here today by the member for Chaguanas West Rather, I beg your pardon, it was said here today by the member for Barataria San Juan that I must not talk about the judgment being a contempt of court. And the member for Barataria San Juan allowed himself to cite the fact that in things that I have said as Attorney General, I have been criticized by the Law Association in misrepresenting what this judgment says. And I want your leave, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to correct for the record of this House, which must be careful to ensure that its records are clear, and to correct for the record of the listening public what I have said, and which is on record, about this judgment when it is charged that I have somehow suggested that in criticizing this judgment, persons are committing a contempt of court. There is nothing further from the truth than that. So with your leave, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will read paragraphs 11 and 12 of a statement which I made, which has given rise to this misrepresentation of what I've said as threatening contempt of court against persons who speak to this judgment. I said on the 18th of May, paragraph 11 of my written statement, it bears emphasis that nothing in the way of these amendments and nothing in the decision of the Privy Council can support any argument that this government, by these amendments, was seeking to disenfranchise the rights of citizens of this country to vote their elected representatives into office. I went on to say at paragraph 12, I emphasize this point because this decision is, of course, one with a political dimension. I emphasize that no rational possibility exists for any political capital to be gained out of anyone misrepresenting this judgment. That would be wrong, tantamount almost to a contempt of court. I urge citizens to take the time to read this judgment carefully. A responsible media should print the judgment in full in a pull-out edition of the Sunday papers so that all citizens can read and intelligently understand the true significance of this judgment without any mischievous spin. I did not say on that occasion, I have never said on any occasion, that for the media to print about this judgment is a contempt of court. And I wish that to be corrected for the record of all time. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the only other matter that I would seek your leave to address in the comments that have been made by the other side is the suggestion that has emanated from the leader of the opposition and all those who support her that this government has delayed in calling elections. I am on record, and every speaker on behalf of this government on this bill is on record, and I will not repeat it lest I be accused of tedious repetition. We are on record as saying that the commitment of this government has been to enable there to be a proper process of local government reform, and it is to that end that the election date was competently and legally extended from the triennial period to the quadrennial period. We accept now that the Privy Council has ruled that the quadrennial does not apply to incumbents, and it is for that reason why we are therefore before this House this afternoon, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to move the bill which is before this House. And may I say, before I take my seat, that when we get to the committee stage, I will be moving 2 short amendments to the bill which is presently before us to introduce 1 recital and to amend Section 2, the definition of councillors and aldermen in the bill which is presently before this House. Mr. Deputy Speaker, with your leave, I thank you.
I beg to move, sir.
And I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Extend the Terms of Office of Councillors and Aldermen elected in December 2019 to provide for elections in 2023 and to validate the actions of the said councillors and aldermen between 2nd December 2022 to 18th May 2023 be now read a second time. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Attorney General, no. Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Extend the Terms of Office of Councillors and Aldermen elected in December 2019 to provide for elections in 2023 and to validate the actions of the said councillors and aldermen between 2nd December 2022 and 18th May 2023.
Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Municipal Corporation Extension of Terms of Office and Validation Bill 2023 be committed to the Committee of the Whole to be considered clause by clause.
Honourable members, the question is that the Municipal Corporation's Extension of Terms of Office and Validation Bill 2023 be committed to the Committee of the Whole to be considered clause by clause. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill clause by clause. Honorable members, I now call this committee meeting to proceed. Welcome from the AG's office.
Clause 1.
Now, honorable members, before we move on, all documents have been circulated. Chief Whip, right? Leader of the House, lovely. All right.
Clause 1.
The question is that clause 1 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 1 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 1 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 2.
The question is that clause 2 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 2 now stand part of the bill.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have circulated a proposed amendment. Mr. Chairman, Deputy Chairman, I have circulated a proposed amendment to clause 2, and that is to delete from clause 2 the definition of councillors and aldermen, and in its stead to substitute the following new definition. Councillors and aldermen mean the persons who served in the corporate office of the council during the period December 1st, 2019 to the 18th of May, 2023.
Baratari Sanwan, member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chair. Mr. Deputy Chair, I'm looking at the new definition that the Attorney General wants to insert. And AG, I don't know if this is an error, but if I remember, the elections were held on the 2nd of December 2019, not the 1st of December 2019.
It's the second. Yes, thank you.
You have the 1st of December, so it's
second.
the amendment you circulated as the 1st, you know.
Honorable AG, right, so
Yes.
according to the day change, it's December 2nd, right, 2019 to May 18, 2023. Right, so noted, member for Baratari Sanwan. Right. Nice. Again, clause 2 as amended, and then the further amendment with regards to the date, December 2nd, 2019. So noted.
Thank you.
Right, so noted. The question is that clause 2 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 2 as amended, we now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Clauses 3 and 4.
The question is that clauses 3 and 4 stand part of the bill. The question is that clauses 3 and 4 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clauses 3 and 4 now stands part of the bill.
Clause 5.
Attorney General, your amendment is circulated.
I haven't seen.
Yes, and one, sorry. Baratari Sanwan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chair. Mr. Deputy Chair, for the purposes of the record, my amendment that was circulated is to delete the entirety of clause 5. The reason and the rationale for this particular amendment is the fact that we are of the belief that if we are extending the terms of the councillors for the period up until the 18th of May 2023, what the bill or this particular clause does it now validates acts of persons' offices that have expired on the 18th of May 2023 till the commencement date of this law. Now, how can we validate actions where persons' offices have already expired even after the extension? So that's the first point with respect to this entire amendment. The second part of it is when this was done in 2003, you would remember that the elections were due in October of 2002. The bill came to the Parliament around February 2003. When that particular Parliament extended the terms of the life of the councillors and aldermen, there was just a simple extension of the terms of the office, and there was no validation per se. Because if we're extending the terms of the offices from December to May, and then the Attorney General also relied on the doctrine of de facto officer, then there's no need to validate. That's the next issue. So the 2 points are: one, we are validating for the future for councillors and aldermen whose offices have expired based on the extension 18th May 2023. And secondly, that there may not be a need to validate based on the practice that was adopted by this Parliament in 2003. Thank you.
Attorney General. Okay. Member for Siparia.
Sure. I support the contribution of the Honourable Member for Barataria San Juan. In my contribution, I had raised this issue of deletion of Clause 5, as Clause 5 being in conflict with other parts of the Act. And we do not think it is necessary to insert this Clause 5 to take us forward for actions and decisions that would be taken after the 18th, when on the 18th, the councillors had already expired or retired, as the case may be.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Chair, Mr. Vice Chairman. I don't accept the proposed amendment. I've already addressed in my winding up the fact that this Act is not speaking into the future. It is seeking to validate the two periods, the period from the 2nd of December to the 18th of May, and the period up to the commencement of the Act. And I think that that answers the point squarely, because at the end of the day, with the greatest of respect, the validation, consistent with the de facto doctrine, which the member for Barataria San Juan has already conceded applies, all that this amendment is seeking to do by Clause 5 is to give legislative efficacy to the de facto doctrine up to when the Act, this bill, becomes an Act of Parliament. So I decline to accept the suggestion for the amendment in its entirety.
Okay, so honourable members, we proceed. The question is that Clause 5 be amended as circulated. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. No. Clause 5 now stand part of the bill. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Preamble.
Yes, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. In the preamble, I wish to propose.
Question is that the preamble to the bill be approved. And I now call on the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I wish to propose the preamble after the third preamble to add a new preamble. So the third preamble currently reads, whereas the said councillors and aldermen have continued to exercise the functions of councillors and aldermen from 2nd December 2022 to 18th May 2023. That's the existing third. I wish to add a fourth, which will read, and whereas there have been by-elections during the period 2019 to 2023.
What I have in
Member
front,
Fisipari.
I thank you, sir. What I have in front of me, and whereas there have been 2 by-elections.
I've deleted, sorry.
When did
Deleted the words "to"
When did you do that?
in my presentation, as I just articulated.
Yes, but you know, 2 simple amendments brought by this Honourable Attorney General, and both of them have been wrong. The ones that you have given us on the piece of paper is different from what we are now proceeding. So, okay, you said you've now changed it to read what? There were no 2 by-elections in that period?
Whereas, as I
Yes.
just read, Leader of the Opposition,
Go ahead.
the amendment which I propose is, whereas there have been by-elections, I delete the word "to" during the period, and I delete the word 2nd December, and I introduce the year 2019 to 2023.
May I kindly ask what is the rationale for this preamble?
The rationale is to capture the history of the by-elections that have occurred in the period 2019 to 2023.
And what value will that be to this validation bill? What benefit will it bring us?
The benefit of that has to do with the definition, the interpretation that we've introduced, which has already been voted on, to introduce Clause 2 as amended.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Chair. Sorry, Attorney General.
Attorney General.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chairman. I have been asked to draw to your attention a printer's error in the long title, which I would like to amend as well.
Mr. Deputy Chair, before I go there, may I just, because this contribution is on the amendment to the preamble, not the long title. Yeah?
I give way. Yes.
Go ahead.
Sure. AG, you'll have to amend your amendment because you said in the preamble by inserting after the 2nd recital, that should now be read 3rd recital. This is the amendment that I have in front of me, AG. And then the other thing, why are you extending the period 2019 to 2023? The reason I ask is because the last by-election we had would have been on the 7th of February 2022. So there were 6 by-elections. There were 5 by-elections in 2021, and there was 1 in 2022. You're giving the whole period of 2019 to 2023? Yes?
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay. Were there? We changed all of them during that period? Well, no, what I'm understanding, Mr. Chair.
I recognize you. Go ahead.
Yes. What I'm understanding now is that there may be changes to aldermen. Are we going to capture this with this particular amendment? Because this only deals with by-elections for councillors. So let's just assume that someone became an alderman on the 2nd of December 2019, and then that person changed out because they probably died or there was change. Are we capturing those changes in aldermen?
The language of the amendment that I've read by way of the introduction of the 4th recital is wide enough. It says, whereas there have been by-elections during the period 2019 to 2023. And I think that suffices, member.
Okay, honorable members. The question is that the preamble to the bill be amended as circulated and as follows. And whereas there have been by-elections during the period 2nd December 2019 to 18th May 2023.
No, it's 2019 to 2023. That's.
Or you're leaving out
Yes.
the May 18 also?
Mr.
Remember, I
Vice
said
Chairman,
as circulated and
Yes.
also amended as follows.
yes, and I amended it
Right.
on my feet.
Right. Just for the records, let's get it for the records for the Hansard.
The amendment that I may read one more time is whereas there have been by-elections during the period 2019 to 2023. The dates 2nd December 2022 and 18th of May are deleted.
Is that the preamble to the bill be amended as follows. And whereas there have been by-elections during the period 2019 to 2023. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. The question is that the preamble to the bill be approved as amended.
As amended, be approved.
Be amended, be approved. As amended, be approved. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. Honourable members, the question is that the bill be now reported to the House. Those in favor?
The title.
The question is that the bill be now reported to the House. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The House will now resume. This House resumes. Attorney General.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to report that the Municipal Corporation's Extension of Terms of Office and Validation Bill 2023 was considered in the Committee of the Whole and was approved with amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with the committee's report.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Municipal Corporation's Extension of Terms of Office and Validation Bill 2023. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to extend the terms of office of councillors and aldermen elected in December 2019 to provide for elections in 2023 and to validate the actions of the said councillors and aldermen between the 2nd December 2022 and 18th of May 2023 be now read a third time and passed.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to extend the terms of office of councillors and aldermen elected in December 2019 to provide for elections in 2023 and to validate the actions of the said councillors and aldermen between 2nd December 2022 and 18th May 2023 be now read a third time and passed. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to extend the terms of office of councillors and aldermen elected in December 2019 to provide for elections in 2023 and to validate the actions of the said councillors and aldermen between 2nd December 2022 and 18th May 2023.
Leader of the House.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. I note motions.
Honourable members, there are two matters that qualify to be raised on the motion for the adjournment of the House. I will now call on the member for St. Augustine.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I brought this motion today because I, on behalf of the constituents of St. Augustine, am not satisfied with the response of the Ministry of Social Welfare and Family Services in an issue concerning the presentation of disaster relief checks or disaster relief grants to the people of the constituency of St. Augustine. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the week beginning November 27th, many parts of Trinidad and Tobago started experiencing showers and thunder showers. Now, St. Augustine constituency is at the foothills of the Northern Range, and the southern boundary of St. Augustine is the Caroni River. So the Caroni River basin has certain activities that takes place during heavy rainfall, and it does affect the constituents. So by the first week of December, several areas within St. Augustine constituency started to see rising flood waters. But it was not the usual flooding. Areas such as Bamboo Number 2, Valsain South, these areas had water up to neck height, literally. Real Spring, Valsain, Spring Village, St. Augustine South, the area known as Morang. The flooding levels were unusual, in my view, because of the negligence of the state. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the riverbanks that on the tributaries towards the Caroni River, the Caroni River bank itself has been neglected for quite some time, as have been other infrastructure related to drainage in this country under this government. And who feels it? It is the regular citizen. In those areas, the riverbanks are supposed to be strengthened during the dry season. The watercourses are supposed to be grubbed or remove the shrubbery. In some areas, you have trees growing in the watercourse because of the length of time it has been without maintenance. There are floodgates in St. Augustine constituency in Bamboo Number 2 in particular that were leaking before I became MP. I sent videos, I sent photographs, I sent letters, I've sent emails to those in authority, and to date,
8 years.
When I ask questions in Parliament, the response is that I am writing too many letters. No. And that the report from the drainage.
Again, members on both sides. Again, please let's hear the member for St. Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My name is Khadija Amin, and when I go to my constituents, I mean business. And in order to represent my constituents, I have written letters, sent emails, photographed videos of leaking floodgates, eroding riverbanks to the various persons in authority, to date with very little response.
In action.
And those floodgates are still leaking, and the response coming out of the minister responsible is
Leader of the House, please, your members, silence.
They are not disturbing me, Mr. Deputy Chair. They are not disturbing me.
They are trying to not hear the truth.
The response from those in authority has been poor. It is clear that they are getting incorrect information, because they keep saying here in the Parliament and other places that the reports I sent to them is incorrect when I have been on the ground and in the field. And the result of these pumps not being fully functional and manned, the floodgates not working, the water courses having overgrown bush, and the riverbanks not being strengthened, is that because of the incompetence and negligence of the government, the people of St. Augustine experienced those devastating flooding. And in the Ministry of Social Welfare, there is a disaster relief grant that pays up to $10,000.
Point of order, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 48.5. The member referred to herself by her name in reach of 48.5.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Overruled. Overruled.
Just wanted to break.
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
No,
I
you
hope
only
you
have
will
10
give
minutes.
me...
Remember, you only have 10 minutes. Proceed.
I hope my 10 minutes does not include that vexatious intervention from the minister. You are robbing the people of St. Augustine of their time, Mr. Minister. My Deputy Chairman, I explained how the government and the state and the negligence and the incompetence from the ministers on the opposite side have led to the severe damage and trauma of the flooding in St. Augustine constituency. And therefore, whatever little intervention the state could offer by way of the disaster relief grant, which is a grant of up to $10,000 given to these households. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are some members of the government who have close relatives living in some of those areas, because there are agency developments and so on, and some ministers of government were present in the area, and they saw for themselves firsthand the type of damage. When there's 4 feet of water or water up to neck height in people's homes, everything is destroyed. $10,000 is but a drop in the bucket to help these people recover their lives. It is a drop. Everything, in fact, that disaster relief grant was $10,000 under the leadership of Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa, and to date it has not increased. But everything has increased in price. So the value of that flood relief grant has depreciated because of what is going on in terms of cost of everything. This little $10,000 now, they have people suffering and begging for it. There are so many people who, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Deputy Speaker, went through all that was required to submit their application properly. As a member of Parliament, myself and the councillors for these affected areas, and I must mention Councillor Richard Rampasad and Councillor Seema Ramsaran, who are on the ground, facilitating and ensuring that every person came forward and produced their information. We ensured that the information going to the ministry was, in terms of the integrity, was very sound, genuine applicants. These are not people who are making up a story. And to have these people waiting since December of 2022 to date, there is no other word but wickedness to describe it. There are persons who applied and have had no response from the Ministry of Social Welfare. There are persons who applied and get phone calls asking them to submit the same information over and over again. There are people who got calls and get $3,000, can't even buy back a washing machine. And these are people, Mr. Chairman, who are poor people. Their washing machine float all the way down to the recreation ground in the flood. And you cannot even give them money to buy back a washing machine, thanks to this PNM government. There are those who got the full $10,000, but I know for a fact that money is not enough. We know it's not enough. And I am asking, why is the Ministry of Social Welfare taking so long to pay persons who are affected by the flooding their flood relief grant? I have been patient. I have been cooperative. I have been reaching out to the minister, the ministry, and facilitating our constituents, providing the information. I have gone above and beyond in hot sun, in the night, day and night, sun or rain, to facilitate this process. Mr. Chairman, I believe we have reached to the point now where it is inhumane, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is, yes, I spent 7 years in local government. It has reached to a point now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where the treatment of the constituents of St. Augustine is inhumane and callous, and I call on the minister to explain.
Minister of Social and Family Services, you have 10 minutes in response.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services understands the negative impact of floods and other unforeseen events on families and communities. And in fact, many of our own employees fall victim of these disasters. So we take our responses very personally. And this is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that following any major disaster, the ministry, as a second responder, collaborates with the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management and the disaster management units of the municipal corporations to coordinate disaster relief for families. And these agencies are well-recognized first responders, and we take guidance from them at all times. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a whole-of-government team, we hasten to provide relief to persons who are experiencing loss of one type or another. And we know that outside of the loss of physical assets, disaster victims can experience distress, anger, fear, frustration, and other psychological and mental challenges. And when children are involved, Mr. Deputy Speaker, reactions to these disasters can lead to post-traumatic stress disorders. And this is where our family services come in and provide counseling. The ministry offers assistance through a series of grants and psychosocial support to bring immediate and long-term recovery to affected residents. And I would like this Honourable House to know that I wish to be absolutely clear that when we engage in disaster relief activities on behalf of citizens, we are balancing two very important objectives: the absolute and necessary requirement to get relief to affected persons in the shortest possible time so as to shorten their suffering and allow for a return to normal living as fast as possible. And second, but no less important objective, is to safeguard and be accountable for the use of taxpayers' money as custodians of the public purse. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a very delicate balancing act because it requires us to act both in haste and to be cautious and careful at the same time. And it is not good, in our respectful view, to go into a community, open our car trunk, and distribute food cards to anyone passing by, as some has done in the past. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a natural tension between these two objectives: to provide speedy relief and to deter fraud and corruption. So sometimes they collide with each other, but as we like to say, time is of the essence, and we always give the highest priority to human suffering and loss of life and property. Notwithstanding, we do not want to compromise.
Members, let's hear the response.
We do not want to compromise our responsibilities to the taxpayers of this country. And all I've just said is that you can imagine the pain of the officers of the ministry and our first responder partners when we became aware of this motion about the alleged complete unsatisfactory response to the residents of St. Augustine who were victims of floods. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this approach is disheartening and demoralizing to our public officers and to our partners. And to tell you the truth in this matter, during a natural disaster, we have to wait for clearance to enter as a second responder. And we must pay attention to the instructions provided by our first responder partners, and only to let our staff go into the affected communities when we have been told to do so. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the ministry, as a responsible employer, cannot allow staff to enter a flooded area if no clearance is provided by the ODPM. Unlike the member of St. Augustine, we are not going to disregard ODPM's instructions to hop on a pickup where water is more than 2 feet high to go through our community. And this is so unsafe and may place more lives and limbs at risk than the disaster itself. And everybody knows that ODPM gave strict instructions that no person should drive their vehicle through 6 inches to 2 feet of floodwater and more, and that even larger vehicles, such as pickup trucks and SUVs, are in danger of floating away. And the person who does this, of course, runs the risk of being electrocuted or getting stuck in a drain, which is difficult to see when the road is covered in water. Once we received the green light, we proceeded to deploy resources to directly support those residents of the Puna-Piako region, including St. Augustine and the surrounding communities that were affected. And this is what the ministry did. Officers from the National Social Development Program, National Family Services Division, our Citizens Engagement and Outreach Service, Social Welfare Division, and Food Support Program were assigned to the region to partner with the Disaster Management Unit in distributing temporary food support to those who lost their food items, conducting outreaches at Real Spring, Spring Village, Bamboo No. 2, and other community centers, providing psychosocial support to those residents who needed it, and directly engaged with residents and provided them with information about grants and services. Mr. Deputy Speaker, altogether, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services assigned 38 officers from 5 divisions and units to provide relief and support in communities severely impacted during the 2022 flooding, including St. Augustine. Additionally, we recently had 3 outreach programs in the St. Augustine area. This level of resource deployment is what the member of St. Augustine calls a completely unsatisfactory response. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to speak about, we got some information from some members from St. Augustine community who were very happy with our response. And these are constituents of the member for St. Augustine. Mr. Rennie Babulal from Bassi Street, Spring Village, Valsin, received a check in the amount of $10,000 on January the 12th and stated, and I quote, "The procedure was fast and I was pleased with it. The service was good and I was satisfied with that. The assistance was good and it helped me to buy my stuff and I really appreciated it." Mr. Mati Mangru, 66 years, of Freeman Road, St. Augustine, also received a check of $10,000 on January the 9th, 2023. And I quote, "The process to collect the check was good."
Honorable Senator, please, members, we are still in the House. The quorum still maintains. Okay? Listen in silence. Proceed.
Mr. Mati Mangru, 66 years, of Freeman Road, St. Augustine, also received a check of $10,000 on January the 9th. And I quote, "The process to collect the check was good. The money was helpful and I am very thankful and grateful. People who receive the grant should fix their business because not all the time you will get assistance and you need to put good use to it in the future." Ms. Lena Joseph of Pillai Street, Spring Village, Valsin, received a check totaling $10,000 on January the 23rd.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to
and I quote,
query whether these
No, you had,
if they give permission for their
member, you had
their
your
money.
opportunity. Please have your seat, please. You had your 10 minutes. Proceed.
Lena Joseph stated, and I quote, "The process was smooth, and I bought a stove and a fridge with it. I bought a fridge and a stove with it. The process was good. The water damaged everything, and the money was not unhelpful. And most important, I got my fridge and my stove that I needed." Another client of Spring Village, Valsin, that person asked to remain anonymous, received a $10,000 check on January the 24th. The process was seamless, and I thought we got the checks very quickly, and it was very helpful. And these are constituents of St. Augustine.
2 more minutes.
So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a total of 1,929 assessments were from the Puna-Piako Regional Corporation. And from this...
Member for St. Augustine. Whether member for St. Augustine, whether it's a debate or whether it's a matter on adjournment, the decorum still stands. You had your opportunity. Member, you just have about just over a minute.
Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I need to get back my time. A total of 1,929 assessments were from the Tunapuna-Piako Regional Corporation, and from this total, the ministry has processed a total of 1,318 applications. 286 checks remain uncollected at the ministry's head office, and 20% of these uncollected checks are for the region of Tunapuna-Piako Regional Corporation. 20 checks are from the St. Augustine constituency. And the ministry continues to make numerous attempts to contact persons to advise them that their checks are ready for collection. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the interest of transparency and accountability for public funds before checks are dispersed, we have to go through a thorough process of assessment and validation for the victims of disasters. And this is for the information of the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine. So far, the ministry has provided $14,208,800 in household and clothing grants for flood relief related to the disaster for December 2022. The Tunapuna-Piako Regional Corporation accounts for 47.7% of this expenditure, or $6,775,900, covering 775 households in the Member of Parliament for St. Augustine constituency.
Thank you, Member. Thank you. Member for Shogunas. Member for Shogunas West. And again, members, please, let's ensure that we hear the particular member that's on the floor. Proceed. Shogunas West. 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to raise this motion, which reads, the need for the government to take immediate action to provide financial and infrastructural support to farmers and farming communities often affected by flooding. Mr. Deputy Speaker, my colleague who preceded me would have spoken about the effects, touched on the effects of the flooding in a different on different issues and in a different context. I, of course, want to touch on this because I think because we are certainly now in the rainy season and we know what has happened certainly in 2022 leading up to November 2022, I think it is a matter to raise this motion at this point in time. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the intention is to address the devastating impact that flooding continues to have on the farmers in the Shogunas West constituency, the wider agricultural sector, and indeed the country as a whole. Recent floods experienced up to November 2022 have caused extensive damage to crops and infrastructure, leading to a worrying decrease in food crop production and a subsequent increase in food prices. These instances of flooding are not only natural, but man-made as well, as it has laid bare the government's lack of planning and foresight to develop the food sector and to move this country towards a certain level of food security. Extreme weather events, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are expected to become more frequent and intense due to climate change, making it crucial to take action to mitigate their impact on the population and economy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I turn quickly to the extent of damage when we have these floodings. The country's agricultural sector is one of the main sources of food, livelihood, employment, and income, contributing significantly to the economy, and should be as protected as possible, yet it remains an at-risk sector. According to the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, the country has experienced significant crop losses in recent years due to flooding, particularly severe in areas such as Mayaro, Rio Claro, and San Grande, which are located in the low-lying coastal plains of the country. The displacement of individuals and families from their homes when their premises are flooded out poses significant social and economic challenges. Displaced persons are entitled, like everyone else, to basic necessities such as shelter, food, and water, but they also suffer from a loss of income, particularly for those who rely on agriculture as their primary source of income. Mr. Deputy Speaker, turning to the devastating impact of flooding on farmers, the flooding that has affected farmers has been nothing short of catastrophic. Farmers in the region have lost crops, livestock, and agricultural equipment due to the excessive flooding. Mr. Deputy Speaker, some practical examples can be found in the Chaguanas West constituency. We have Sugrim Trace, Jerningham Junction farmers, Cunupia farmers, Caroni farmers, Felicity farmers. We have also seen an accompanying increase in the presence of the dreaded giant African snail. These are all practical realities consequent on flooding. The flood water has also caused soil erosion, which will have long-term consequences for the region's agricultural productivity. The livelihood of these farmers, many of whom are already struggling to make ends meet, have been severely impacted by these floods. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I spoke about Sugrim Trace as one of the practical examples, one of the areas affected. And just to give an indication, it is a major road that runs in an east-west direction in the Chaguanas West constituency. It separates two large agricultural sites referred to as Sugrim Lands North and Sugrim Lands South. My colleague for Chaguanas East will know about these areas as well. The northern side has major concrete-lined drains running in an east-west direction alongside the main roads. These are occasionally maintained, but mostly overgrown, collecting debris and garbage which obstructs the free flow of water, resulting in major flooding, especially in the rainy season. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is one situation. There exists a network of smaller earthen drains in the farmlands of both the northern and southern side of the Sugrim Trace lands. And these are prone to more vegetative growth, also disallowing the free flow of water. So these are matters which are practical. It occurs every year, but we need to treat with it so that we don't have the repeat of the devastation that we see from year to year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look at the effect on food crop production, the impact of the floods on the food crop production has been significant. The loss of crops and agricultural land has led to a decrease in food production, which will ultimately result in higher prices for consumers. This will not only impact the residents of Chaguanas West constituency, but will also have a ripple effect on the wider economy. It is unacceptable that the government has not taken the necessary steps to mitigate these risks and protect the livelihoods of our farmers. When we look at the effect on food prices, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the increase in food prices that will result from the decrease in food production is a serious concern. The rising cost of food will put an added burden on the already strained budgets of families in our constituencies. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure that the basic needs of our citizens are met, and the rising cost of food will make this increasingly difficult. The government's lack of planning and neglect of the agricultural sector have contributed to this situation, and they must be held accountable for their inaction. When we turn to destruction of infrastructure, the flooding has not only impacted the agricultural sector, but also has caused extensive damage to infrastructure in the regions. Roads and bridges have been washed away and buildings have been damaged. This destruction will have long-term consequences for the region's economy and will require significant investment to repair. The government's failure to prepare for these types of disasters is simply unacceptable. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I turn to the government's neglect of the agricultural sector once again, and to focus on the reasons why flooding has become such a significant issue for this sector, and in particular, the lack of government maintenance and preventative work from the Ministry of Agriculture. I will also outline some of the steps that government could take to protect farmers and residents from destruction. It is clear that the government's neglect of the agricultural sector has contributed to the devastating impact that flooding has had on our farmers and the wider economy. The government has failed to invest in the necessary infrastructure and technologies that could mitigate the impact of flooding and other disasters. They have also failed to provide adequate support to farmers and have allowed the sector to stagnate. The government must take a multifaceted approach to protect our farmers and residents from the devastation caused by flooding. And this approach must include a combination of preventative measures and post-flood response and recovery efforts. Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I ask how much time I have again?
You just have about 3 more minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Deputy Speaker, preventative measures include upgrading and maintaining the country's drainage infrastructure, investing in agricultural infrastructure and technology, and implementing measures to reduce the impact of human activities on the environment, such as deforestation and urbanization. Furthermore, the government has failed to implement measures to prevent deforestation and soil erosion, which can cause desiltation in rivers and waterways, reducing their capacity and increasing the risk of flooding. Similarly, the government has failed to regulate urbanization, which can lead to the paving over of natural surfaces, preventing water from being absorbed into the soil and increasing the risk of surface runoff and flooding. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I conclude, the government must take immediate action to address the challenges posed by severe weather and flooding in Trinidad and Tobago. This can include investing in climate-resilient infrastructure and sustainable agricultural practices, providing financial assistance to affected farmers, and developing contingency plans to mitigate the impact of future extreme weather events. The recent floods in 2022 have highlighted the urgent need for the government to prioritize the agricultural sector and take the necessary steps to protect our farmers and the wider economy, and even the country as a whole. It must invest in the infrastructure and technologies that will mitigate the impact of flooding and other disasters. They must also provide adequate support to our farmers to ensure that they can continue to provide for their families and contribute to the economy. It is time for the government to take responsibility for their lack of planning and neglect of the agricultural sector and take action to ensure that our citizens are protected from the devastating impact of disasters like flooding. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you also. I recognize the Minister in the Ministry of Works and Transport. And member, you have 10 minutes in response.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member for Shoguners West. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to highlight and understand the concerns of the member from Shoguners West. Like him and myself, we're son of that soil, the food belt of Trinidad and Tobago. And I do appreciate him highlighting some of these issues, but also in the effort to also, pinpoint and highlight some of the efforts this government has been taking to alleviate some of the concerns that he's been having. And I have the distinct pleasure, on behalf of the minister, both ministers in the Ministry of Agriculture, Minister Kazim Hussain and Mr. Singh, Senator Kazim Hussain and Senator Abhinav Singh, to then speak a bit on some of the initiatives that they have going forward. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries provides several avenues of assistance to registered farmers and fisherfolks. Year after year, we are plagued by the negative effects of flooding to our farmers, our members, and the farming communities. The flooding is a natural disaster, and we as a government continue to do our part with the resources available to ensure that our primary producers are given...
Members, please. Again, any member is free to depart the chamber once they desire, and again, they are free to do so in silence. Proceed.
I see that the members are quite happy, but I'm sure you the kurma is ready as soon as we finish. So I will have it there to be able to, everyone's excited and then arrival day tomorrow. So as I continue, happy in their arrival day in advance. Anyways, the flooding, this government has doing their best with the resources to ensure that our primary producers are given support following these unprecedented impacts. So I start with flooding compensation. Over the last 5 years, the ministry has distributed $130,992,575 in flood relief compensation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this was claims made by approximately 12,923 members of the farming community across the length and breadth of this country. Grants. We have grants up to $100,000. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have seen the impact of both the agro incentive grant and the youth fast track program. These government funding programs assist agriculture entrepreneurs with the assistance to expand their current operation. To date, approximately $19.5 million in grant support has been distributed to 187 persons over the agriculture sector. This includes 26 young persons under the fast track program in the first phase. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to inform this Honorable House that many of the young and enthusiastic applicants requested funding for climate-smart technologies. I know the member was concerned about how we plan to mitigate the future, and we understand that climate change is real. And that is why we are providing the technology and the funding so that our farmers, our future farmers, could understand what we are dealing with. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a clear demonstration of this government working hard and hand in hand to provide aid for the growth and development of this sector. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to talk a bit about the infrastructure, and I know the member highlighted certain points. Over the last 3 fiscal years, the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries have taken 5 major infrastructural programs to alleviate flooding across high-risk farming communities. In doing so, a total of approximately $8.6 million have been committed, with specific emphasis in areas such as Plumerton, Orange Grove, where 705 farmers will benefit. And as we talk about infrastructure, I would like to also, as the member from St. Augustine, the member from St. Augustine.
Silence.
As a member of St. Augustine, and if they allow me to speak, I can speak a highlight of some of the work that even the Ministry of Work is doing through the good work at the Ministry of Work through our Honourable Minister, Mr. Rohanson, and Senator Rohanson. And to date, we currently have in the central area alone 168 projects, just in the central area alone. Phase 1 of this encompasses both phase 1 and phase 2 of these projects. 68 of these projects, 96 projects out of 86 projects out of 96, I'm sorry, have been completed. And phase 2, 10 are completed. Right, this is only phase 2. 10 are completed, 39 are ongoing, and 23 are yet to be commenced. With that being said, and if they allowed a listing, you can see clearly that the ministry is doing active work. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's the saying, "Dead man walking."
Silence.
There's a saying.
Silence.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There's a saying currently called the dead man walking. And, it's interesting that we have a current alderman taking TikTok videos of the good work that is done by the Ministry of Works and Transport, on our strength. So it's quite interesting, to see these sort of videos being produced and claimed for, although done by the Ministry of Works and Finance, the Ministry of Works and Transport. Incentives. Presently, there are 92 categories of agriculture incentives available to all registered farmers. Mr. Deputy Speaker, under these incentive programs, members of the agriculture sector benefit from a range of incentives, including but not limited to irrigation, land preparation, vehicles, tractors, integrated pest management systems, water pumps, machinery and equipment, pond construction and pasture fencing. Initiatives for improving service and delivery. Number of initiatives aimed to improving the delivery of service to our farmers base. Some are included.
Silence on both sides.
The issuance of the rapid e-cytosanitary certificates. We have now fully transitioned to a live exchange of the e-cytosanitary certificates, including using the International Plant Protection Convention hub for all commercial consignment. The electronic exchange of certificates and accompanying documents for trade in plant and plant machinery and plant products is a significant step for the country in improving trade efficiency. A web portal that allows members of the public to begin the process of registration online before visiting the ministry's country's office. Full automation of the plant import permit process with online process for application import permits through interface on the TT BizLink.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise on standing order 48.1. I thought this motion is on flooding. I'm hearing 48.1.
Overruled. Remember, you just have 2 minutes.
I am guided because your member. And the TT Business platform also done well between the Ministry of Trade and Industry. On the online electronic catalog, the Grow Trinbago website is launched in August 2022.
Members, shall I say it is late in the evening? You know what I mean? Because we have been here since 1:30. All right, and again, we are on the matter of the adjournment. Let's listen to the minister. He took time to come to answer the question posed by you all. So let's listen to the question in silence, the answer in silence, please.
Thank you for your protection, Deputy Speaker. This allows users to access information, including the availability of commodities and planting material, soil type required for best yield crops, the most suitable period for which to grow, and the general guidelines of growing crops. The implementation of NAMDEFCO online market to facilitate the linking of both buyers and sellers electronically. The implementation and use of mobile app for the conduct and inspection of plant quarantine inspectors, and to allow the real-time decision-making and approval lending to improve efficiency and operation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago continues to put people first, and in respect of this, our farmers and members of the farming community. We remain committed to working closely with all stakeholders to develop new climate-resistant programs and strategies that will benefit and protect all members of the agriculture sector.
Thank you, member. Okay. Members, again, any member is free to depart the chamber at this time on their own will. All right? Please don't let the chair have to bring it into effect. Right? Any member is free to leave at this time. Right? And I'm not going to stand up again for any disturbance. Chief Whip, come on. Set the example. No, set the example. Right. Honorable members, as we all know, tomorrow is Indian Arrival Day. And before I put the question on the adjournment of the House, I will invite members to bring greetings on this occasion. I will now recognize the member for San Fernando West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise on behalf of the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago to celebrate tomorrow the festival, the national event and recognition of Indian Arrival Day. 178 years ago, on a Saturday, on the 16th of February, 1845, some 227 souls left India, bound for Trinidad and Tobago. Back then, Trinidad and Tobago could only be a place of imagination. In 1845, as that first journey was made, there was a lot going on in the world. In 1845, we had the annexation of Texas, which in the United States then led to the war between the United States and Mexico. In 1845, there was the Irish famine, where 1 million people in Europe suffered and died. In 1845, the demands of the colonies in the British Empire were strong. There was turmoil. And there, our brothers and sisters in India, our ancestors, decided to cross the dark, dangerous waters in what was then to become a journey that over 147,000 souls took in the period 1845 straight through to 1917. The first vessel that they boarded was interestingly named after a symbol of religion, Fatah al-Razak. Fatah means the opener in Arabic, or purveyor, commencement. Al-Razak is one of the 99 names of the Almighty God, and it literally means the epitome of providing or sustenance. Al-Razak. Razak could mean rain, as rain sustains us and water is provided. And it's sort of interesting to look back now, 178 years later, and realize that our brothers and sisters in indentureship then came alongside many others in indentureship, the Chinese, the Portuguese, following upon our brothers and sisters who came in terrible circumstances through slavery abolished in 1838. But it was the pack of us, the pack of people, the pack of ancestors of ours who arrived in so many different conditions to what we understand today, in terrible conditions, that came to really sustain our country. So it's quite fitting that that name, Al-Razak, was the name chosen for that first vessel. Mr. Deputy Speaker, arriving here in Port of Spain, in the Gulf of Paria, eventually some leaving at Nelson Island, these were difficult times. But today in Trinidad and Tobago, we look back, 78 years ago, we were profound enough in San Fernando in Skinner Park to celebrate 100 years of Indian arrival in the city of San Fernando at Skinner Park. And today we have the national remembrance of our indentured brothers and sisters who came to serve this country and who continue to serve this country. It's interesting that the first person recorded coming off the Fatah al-Razak was recorded as the name Bharat, which, as we know, is the reference to the Mother India. And perhaps it is that anchor, that foot that came here, that landed here, that really anchored us back to India. No different from our anchor back to Africa or our anchor back to China, and in some cases the Middle East, because the process of immigrants arriving in Trinidad continued for centuries. The government pays homage to our forefathers and ancestors on the Indian continent who made that journey across here and who brought us our descendants, our brothers and sisters today as we sit in this parliament. Many of us descended in roots from Mother India, but we also recognize as a government that this country has the beauty of participation, and that our Jahaji Bhais, immortalized in song, really do continue to work alongside and with our fellow brothers and sisters in Trinidad. We are descended, all of us, from difficult circumstances. We all chose Trinidad and Tobago eventually as our homes. We are proud of this nation, and the government is proud of the people of this nation. And today we celebrate one element of that people of Trinidad and Tobago, our Indian ancestors and brothers, as we wish Trinidad and Tobago a happy Indian Arrival Day tomorrow. 178 years and still going strong. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I recognize the member for Princestown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, allow me to greet your good self, members of this House, and the national community in a greeting that is familiar to the East Indian community that brought this through the preservation of their language in Hindi, in Urdu, and in some instances from areas of Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. And that is Sitaram or Assalamu Alaikum. Mr. Deputy Speaker, 178 years ago, East Indians brought a philosophy of Matri Deo Bhava, which means mother is our first God. Since then to now, we have adopted Trinidad and Tobago through being immigrants first, descendants, and today being citizens of this great republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It's on the shoulders of our East Indian ancestors who survived through the perilous journey of the Kalapani 178 years ago, coming to a distant land unfamiliar to them, but making the ultimate sacrifice in order for their children and generations to come one of a better quality of life. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm reminded as I stand here as a proud descendant of the East Indian community of the sacrifices of eating mar and rice, which is essentially water that is strained from boiled rice, because at many times they had nothing else to eat while they toiled on the sugar plantations and in the rice fields. They wore clothing out of flour bags, and they slept on what we know today in the Hindustani word of pal. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are many scholars, doctors, academics, lawyers, and two of the best prime ministers that this East Indian community has given to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is often said, to know where one is going, we have to know from where we've come. And I cannot stand here in all good conscience and say that the East Indian community was treated with any sense of equality over the past few decades in Trinidad and Tobago. They have had to fight their way, whether it's through the courts, all the way up to the Privy Council. And today I stand here paying tribute to those persons, those politicians and non-politicians alike, in the name of Basteo Pandey, Kamla Prasad Bisesa, Ramesh Lawrence Maraj, Anand Ram Logan, Jagdev Singh, and others who fought on behalf of organizations like the Mahasabha, Swaha, Arya Samaj, who laid the foundation not only for education and culture, but ensuring that the East Indian community was equally represented. When we sing, here every creed and race find an equal place in our national anthem. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to pay particular attention and tribute to the contribution that the East Indian community has made in the sphere of education. Over the last 5 years, Lakshmi Girls Hindu College, on 5 occasions consecutively, won the President's Medal. And that is a testimony to the value that the East Indian community continues to place on education. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is no secret that when the East Indian community arrived in Trinidad, it was to work on the sugar estates. And it was Mr. Basteo Pandey, the founder of United National Congress, a party that I'm proud to stand here in this parliament and represent, that first appointed a cane cutter to the Senate of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the name of Dora Bridgemohan. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I share this because we are eternally proud of where we've come and the shoulders that we stand on. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in India for national observances, they say Jai Hind, which means victory to India. Today, as a descendant on behalf of the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, the United National Congress, my colleagues from Pointe-a-Pierre, Siparia, Naparima, St. Augustine, Couva South, Princestown, Urpuch East, Barataria San Juan, Mayaro, Maruga Tableland, Shogunas West, Faizabad, Kumoto Manzanilla, Couva North, Carney East, Tabaquit, Carney Central, Urpuch West, and Shogunas East. I say to the East Indian community, thank you. Thank you for the work, the foundation that you have laid. There's much to labor on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because while I pay tribute to the East Indian community for the value that they place on education and building Trinidad and Tobago alongside the other communities, I cannot help but think and reflect that because of the callous wickedness of those in authority, that the Shiva boys and Parvati girls, for 8 years remain languishing while our children do not have a school to go to in these areas. It was those same schools that the PNM referred to as cowsheds that today are producing the best doctors, the best lawyers, the best business people, and the best prime ministers this country has ever seen. So on behalf of the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, my members of Parliament and the opposition bench, We pledge that we'll continue to fight for the East Indian community, but not only the East Indian community, all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So therefore, when we stand and we sing here, every creed and race find an equal place, we can truly say that in Trinidad and Tobago, that is what exists. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you and I congratulate the East Indian community for their contribution they have made for the past 178 years and going into the future. I thank you.
Honourable members, it is my honour to also bring greetings to the people of Trinidad and Tobago on the occasion of Indian Arrival Day 2023. Indian Arrival Day was declared a national holiday in 1994 to celebrate the legacy of over 143,000 indentured labourers from the South Asian subcontinent who arrived on our shores between 1845 and 1917. The contribution of the East Indian community to Trinidad and Tobago is immeasurable and is ever present in our food, culture, language, literature, politics, and festivals. Today, events such as Diwali, Eid al-Fitr, Pagwa, Hosei have been intricately woven into the cultural fabric of our country. In the field of literature, world-renowned authors such as Samuel Selvon and V.S. Naipaul have brought great acclaim to Trinidad and Tobago, with their vivid imagery and description of post-colonial life in these islands. Though there are many notable East Indian musicians in Trinidad and Tobago, two stand out most to me, Sundar Popo and Drupati. I am sure many of you would remember the energy of big hits such as Roll Up the Tassa. Doubles has become the chosen breakfast of many citizens, and one only needs to go back to social media timelines during the pandemic to understand how important it is to the Trinbagonian lifestyle. As we marvel at their contributions, it must be noted that strong family ties are a salient aspect of the East Indian community. These ties, coupled with their strong sense of community, help them overcome the challenges and struggles of indentureship and allow them to hold on to much of their culture, religion, and practices, which are observed to this day. On behalf of the Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, my family and myself, I take this opportunity to wish you all a happy and safe Indian Arrival Day 2023. Honourable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. All in favour say aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.